I'm Evelyn Harper, 77 years old. If someone had told me before that I'd spend 2 months at Pinewood Nursing Home in Salem, Oregon, I would have laughed and said no way. I never imagined myself ending up there. At least not yet. But life always knows how to surprise you with a lesson. I came to Pinewood just intending to stay temporarily, to recover from a hip fracture after a fall, like a brief stopover. But those 2 months changed me. They made me see things I'd been blind to. About aging, about regrets, about what life means. Some lessons were harsh. Some were enlightening. But all were important. I met people there some remembered, some abandoned. Through quiet conversations and restless nights, I found 7 things I think everyone should know. No matter how young you are, you'll grow old someday. And I want to share this story. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. It all started on a rainy November morning in 2024 in Willow Creek, Oregon, where I'd lived my whole life in a little house with a rose garden. I was pruning the bushes when I slipped on the wet ground and fell hard onto the stone path. A sharp pain shot up from my hip, and I knew right away I was in big trouble. Sarah, my daughter in Seattle, drove down as soon as she heard. The doctor at the Portland hospital said I'd fractured my hip, needed surgery, and then time to recover. "You can't stay home alone, Mom," Sarah said, her voice firm. I argued, insisting I could manage. But deep down, I knew she was right. Michael, my son in Los Angeles, was tied up with meetings, only calling for a quick check-in. The doctor suggested a nursing home, and Sarah found Pinewood Nursing Home in Salem, about an hour's drive from my place. I hated the idea. To me, a nursing home was for people who'd given up, where life was just waiting around. I pictured cold hallways, old folks staring blankly from wheelchairs, and I didn't want to be part of that scene. But then I looked at my bandaged leg and thought of my empty house with no one to tend it. Sarah said, "Just a few weeks, Mom. Once you're better, you'll go right back." I nodded reluctantly, thinking I'd be out soon. On moving day, I packed a few clothes, a family photo from when James, my husband, was alive, and an old book I hadn't finished. Sarah drove me to Pinewood in silence. When the car stopped in front of a drab gray building with a faded Pinewood Nursing Home sign, my heart sank. A young nurse with her hair tied high pushed a wheelchair out to meet me. I tried walking without it, but the pain forced me to sit, feeling like I just lost a piece of my freedom. "Sebing, welcome to Pinewood," she said, her voice overly chipper, like I was checking into some resort. I just nodded, didn't reply, my eyes fixed on the glass door leading inside. Sarah stayed a bit, setting up my room, then rushed off for work in Seattle. She hugged me, promised to return on the weekend, but I saw worry in her eyes when she left. I sat on the bed, staring at the small room with white walls and a faint antiseptic smell in the air. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd soon be home, watering my roses, and living like before. But back then, I didn't know 2 months at Pinewood wouldn't just heal me physically. It had forced me to face corners of myself I'd avoided my whole life. Life, as I'd soon find out, is never as simple as we think. My first day at Pinewood Nursing Home felt like stepping into a strange world. My room was so small, it barely fit a single bed, a rickety wooden table, and a tiny closet. I set the family photo on the table, looking at James smiling brightly, next to a young Sarah and Michael, then sighed. The air carried a whiff of antiseptic, a smell I'd hated since my Portland hospital days. I wanted to open the window for some fresh air, but it was locked tight, leaving only a narrow slit overlooking a patchy lawn outside. The nurse, the one with the high ponytail from yesterday, knocked, bringing a lunch tray, bland potato soup and a dry slice of bread. "You okay, Miss Harper?" she asked, still with that forced smile. I nodded curtly, not wanting to talk much. When she left, I tried standing, but the pain in my hip yanked me back down. I had to call her back to help me to the common room, and that helplessness made me want to scream. Me, Evelyn Harper, who once built an entire garden by hand, now needing help for every step. The common room was bigger, but no less stifling. An old TV hung on the wall, blaring Jeopardy, with a scratchy sound that drowned out the whispers of a few people sitting around. About a dozen elderly folks were there. A thin old man dozing in an armchair. Another woman staring blankly out the window, her trembling hands clutching a teacup. I wondered how long they'd been here, if they still hoped to leave. My wheelchair was rolled near the window, and I sat there, watching. Everything at Pinewood seemed slow, like time was stuck in a dull loop. I heard a small laugh from the corner. A silver-haired woman with bright eyes was telling a story to a man with a deeply wrinkled face. They seemed different from the rest, alive, even if just for a moment. I wondered what kept them here, what let them still laugh. But then another nurse came in, pushing a med cart, and the room fell silent again. I looked outside, saw the rain still falling steadily on the grass, and thought of my rose garden in Willow Creek. I wanted to go home, to get out of this place right then and there. That first day, I just wanted to curl up, reject everything around me. I hated the antiseptic smell, the scratchy TV, the way people here looked at me like I was already one of them. But sitting there, I started noticing small things. The sad eyes of the dozing man, the rare smile of the silver-haired woman. I didn't know then that from these very people, I'd learn lessons that would change how I see life. That first day at Pinewood wasn't easy, but it was the start of a journey I never expected. The next day at Pinewood, I started getting used to the TV's hum and the antiseptic smell. I'd often sit in the common room near the window, watching the steady rain on Salem's lawn. That day, an older man, thin with stark white hair, quietly rolled his wheelchair up beside me. He introduced himself as Arthur Bennett, 82, once a real estate big shot in Portland. His voice was low, tinged with fatigue, but his eyes were sharp, like they had stories to tell. I nodded hello, not planning to say much, but he started talking without me asking. Arthur used to own a string of buildings in downtown Portland, drove a Cadillac, and vacationed in Hawaii every summer. I thought I had it all, he said, tapping the arm of his wheelchair lightly. But then a stroke hit 5 years ago, took his ability to walk, and everything fell apart. His kids, 2 sons, were busy with jobs in California, rarely called, let alone visited. Last time the oldest came was a year ago, stayed less than 20 minutes, he said, his voice catching. His friends, the ones who'd toasted with him at parties, were mostly gone, or had long forgotten him. I listened, a chill running down my spine. Arthur wasn't just talking about himself. He was painting a picture I feared I'd fall into. I asked, "Are you sad?" He gave a faint smile looking at the rain. "Sure I am, but the worst is realizing no one needs me anymore. The world keeps turning, and I'm left here." His eyes reddened then, his hand gripping the wheelchair arm like he was hiding weakness. Arthur's story made me think about myself. I'd been proud of my independence, my Willow Creek house, and the rose garden I tended. But sitting here, I remembered Sarah inviting me to Seattle, me brushing her off because I was busy, watering plants or cleaning. I thought of coffee dates with friends I skipped for work at school, figuring there'd be time later. Time, it turns out, waits for no one. Arthur went on, I thought money and status would keep people around. But sitting here, with no one walking through that door for me, I get it, loneliness is the slowest killer. The next day, I saw Arthur alone in the corner, staring at the hallway door. No one came. I rolled over, asked if he wanted tea. He nodded, and we sat there, silent, just listening to the rain. I realized at Pinewood, it's not illness or age that hurts most, it's the emptiness of being forgotten. I thought of Sarah, Michael, and wondered if they'd forget me like Arthur's kids. I'd chased work, thinking a stable life was enough. But now, watching Arthur, I saw it wasn't enough at all. The first lesson came from him. Loneliness is the biggest disease, not the hip pain, not the cramped room, but the feeling of being left behind. I told myself if I get out of Pinewood, I'll call Sarah more, won't let precious relationships slip away. Arthur lost everything, but he unknowingly gave me a chance to look back, and I knew I didn't want to end up like him. Sitting here, waiting for a door that never opens. After a few days at Pinewood, I started getting used to the slow pace of life here. One morning, while sitting in the common room, with a cold cup of tea in hand, I noticed an elderly woman in a wheelchair a few meters away. She wore a pale blue sweater, her hair neatly pinned up, and was chatting and laughing with a young nurse. I caught her name faintly, Margaret Sullivan, 79 years old. When the nurse left, she rolled over to me, introducing herself with a warm voice. I'm Margaret, used to run a bakery in Eugene. You're new here, right? I nodded, briefly mentioning my fall in Willow Creek. She smiled. Don't worry, you'll get used to it here. Margaret began telling me about her life. She'd owned a famous bakery in Eugene, where customers lined up every morning for bread and pastries. I worked 16 hours a day, no holidays, no weekends, she said, her eyes glinting with pride, but then she touched her leg, her voice dropping. Now I'm paying for it. Type 2 diabetes. Bad complications, can't walk anymore. I saw her hands tremble as she held a cup of water, and a nurse came over to check her blood sugar right after. She winced as the needle pricked her finger, but still managed to smile. My sweet tooth finally turned on me. Margaret's story jolted me. I thought back to my days teaching in Willow Creek, often snacking on donuts and sugary coffee during breaks. I rarely exercised, thinking I was still fine, that I had plenty of time to change. But looking at Margaret, I saw the cost of that neglect. She went on, I made decent money from the bakery, bought a house, a car, even traveled around Oregon. But now I sit here, can't stand on my own. And money doesn't help a bit. She pointed at her wheelchair. See this? Without health, it's all meaningless. A few days later at lunch, I saw Margaret in the corner, clutching her stomach, her face pale. A nurse rushed over, saying her blood sugar had crashed, and she needed rest. I rolled over to check on her, and she sighed. I snuck a bite of cake from someone's birthday today. Just one bite, and my body couldn't take it. I stayed quiet, thinking of times I ignored aches in my legs or ate rushed, greasy meals. Margaret took my hand, her voice serious. You've still got a chance, Evelyn. Don't wait until you're like me to regret it. Her words echoed in my head all night. Lying in bed, feeling the dull ache in my hip, I wondered if I'd avoided Pinewood by taking better care, eating healthier, walking more. Margaret once had it all, money, reputation, but now she just wanted to take one step without a wheelchair. I realized health isn't something you can buy back, not like the house or rose garden I'd been proud of. Money, it turns out, is fleeting when your body betrays you. The second lesson came from Margaret. Health matters more than money. She taught me that all the achievements in the world mean nothing if you can't enjoy them. I told myself if I leave Pinewood, I'll change. No more morning donuts. No more laziness. Margaret lost her health to past choices, but she gave me a wake-up call. I don't want to be here in 10 years, regretting not cherishing my body while I could. After a week at Pinewood, I got used to the nurse's footsteps in the hall and the TV's hum from the common room. But I couldn't get used to my single room. It was so small I could touch all four walls in a few steps, if I could still walk. A single bed hugged the wall, a scarred wooden table, and a tiny closet holding the few clothes I'd brought. On the table, I set the family photo, James, Sarah, Michael, and me, beaming at a Willow Creek picnic. Beyond that, there was nothing else. No roses, no books, not even the armchair I loved reading the paper in every morning. I miss my house in Willow Creek. It wasn't big, but it was full of a lifetime's worth of things. The leather sofa I bought after 20 years of teaching, a closet stuffed with dresses from my youth, and the prize-winning rose garden from the local fair. I'd spent hours picking curtains, polishing the china set, thinking those things defined my life. But now, sitting in this single room, I realized I didn't miss them as much as I'd thought. They were there 100 miles away, and I was still getting by. One afternoon, the head nurse came to me, hesitant. Miss Harper, Sarah called. She says they might need to sell the house to cover costs if you stay longer. I thought I'd be shocked, cry over losing my beloved home. But oddly, I just nodded, saying, if it's needed, sell it. I surprised myself. That house, once my whole world, was now just a faint memory. I looked around the single room, saw the family photo, and thought, as long as I have this, I'm okay. That feeling grew clearer talking to folks at Pinewood. That day I saw an old man across the hall. He'd been a mechanic in Salem, owned a big garage. Now he just had an old suitcase and a few grandkid photos. I thought cars were everything, he said, smiling sadly. Now I just want to hear the kids' voices on the phone. I nodded, realizing the things we gather, cars, houses, stuff, don't follow us here. They're just objects, lovely for a while, then fading when we can't hold on to them anymore. That night, I lay in bed, hearing rain tap Pinewood's window. I thought of years chasing material things, buying decorations, fixing up the house, only for them to sit silent somewhere now, meaningless. Here I just needed a warm meal, a hot tea, and a few minutes with Margaret or Arthur. The things that once mattered, my sofa, Rose's house, were memories now. Not what I needed to keep going. The third lesson came from this single room. Material things lose their meaning. I used to think my life was measured by what I owned, but at Pinewood, I saw how wrong that was. If I leave here, I won't waste time hoarding stuff. I want to make memories with Sarah, with Michael, with people I love. Because in the end, it's not the house or garden that stays. It's the moments I truly lived. By my second week at Pinewood, I was getting used to the quiet of my single room and the steady rhythm here. One morning, sitting in the common room with a tea in hand, I noticed a white-haired woman, petite, by the fireplace. She wore a gray sweater, her eyes bright but tinged with sadness. She rolled over to me, introducing herself. I'm Ruth Carter, 88. Sheer Evelyn, the new one, right? I nodded, briefly mentioning my fall in Willow Creek. Ruth smiled faintly. I thought I'd never end up here either. Ruth started sharing her life, her voice slow but full of life. She'd been a nurse during the war. I drove ambulances through bombs, patched up young soldiers in smoke and fire, she said, pointing into the air like she was tracing memories. She spoke proudly of those independent days, making choices, acting alone, needing no help. But 3 years ago, she fell in her kitchen, broke her femur, and hasn't walked since. Shua, and now I need someone to bathe me, she said, her voice catching. Can you imagine? Someone who saved dozens of lives, can't dress herself anymore. I listened, my heart tightening. Ruth told me about the first time a Pinewood nurse had to help her use the bathroom. I cried all night, she admitted, eyes welling up. Not from pain, but because I lost myself. I looked at her, then down at my own legs, still aching from my fall. I thought of my days in Willow Creek, driving to the store, mowing the lawn, cooking, all things I took for granted, now needing help to be wheeled around or stand. I realized how precious that freedom was. One afternoon, I saw Ruth alone in Pinewood's backyard, watching the rain. I rolled over, and she answered my question. What do you miss most? She sighed, walking Evelyn. The day I climbed into that ambulance on my own. No one holding me up. Now I dream of standing. Just once. Her words made me think of times I skipped walks, because I was tired or lounged in my armchair out of laziness. I'd had strong legs, freedom to do anything, but never valued it until it was gone. Ruth took my hand, her voice stern. You've still got a chance. If you leave here, don't lose your independence like me. Move while you can. Work while you're able. I nodded, a fear creeping in. Fear I'd end up here one day, helpless like Ruth, regretting lost days of freedom. I remembered driving across Oregon, wind in my hair, feeling in control. Now at Pinewood, I'm dependent, and that hurts more than my hip. The fourth lesson came from Ruth. Independence is precious. She showed me that the simple freedom to walk, dress, cook, is the greatest gift we overlook. If I leave Pinewood, I won't take my legs for granted. I want to stand, walk, live fully, while I can. Ruth lost her independence to age and illness, but she gave me a warning. I don't want to be here in 10 years, looking back, wishing I'd cherished my freedom when I had the chance. After 2 weeks at Pinewood, I started feeling a shift in myself, however small. One morning, sitting in the common room with a cold tea in hand, I noticed a petite woman with white hair by the window. She wore a pale yellow sweater, her face glowing despite eyes clouded by age. She rolled over with a big smile. Hi, I'm Clara, 85. You're Evelyn, right? I nodded, surprised by her cheer. I see you sitting here a lot, she said, like watching the rain. I smiled faintly, saying it reminded me of my rose garden in Willow Creek. Clara shared her story with a warm voice. She'd lived in Salem nearly 50 years, raised 3 kids as a seamstress. I wasn't rich, she said, eyes sparkling, but I always found joy in little things. I asked. Like what? She pointed out the window, like morning sunshine, or birds chirping out there. Here, I don't have much, but I'm still happy. I looked at her wondering how she could smile, when her family rarely visited, when Pinewood was just a dull place for her. One day, I saw Clara in the backyard, under a small awning, out of the rain. She invited me over, handing me a hot tea from a thermos she'd brought. "Sit with me," she said. "The rain's nice to listen to." She sat quietly, hearing water patter, and feeling the warmth of our cups. Clara turned to me. "You know I lost everything once. My house, my health, even my husband 20 years ago. But I learned if I keep dwelling on what's gone, I've got nothing left to live for." She pointed at sunlight, peeking through clouds. "I'm happy I can still see that. That's enough." Her words hit me hard. I thought of my days in Willow Creek, always chasing bigger things, a nicer house, a perfect garden. I rarely stopped to watch a sunset or savor a simple meal. At Pinewood, I'd griped about bland soup or my cramped room. But Clara found joy in what I ignored. One day she told me about her birthday here. Just a small cake from a nurse, no family, yet she smiled. I sang to myself, and that was fun enough. I looked at her, feeling a lightness I'd never had. That night I lay in bed, thinking of Clara. She had so little, no kids around, no health, no freedom, yet she was happy. I remembered times I'd brushed off small joys. A call from Sarah, an afternoon in the garden, chasing something grander. Clara taught me happiness isn't in big things, but in simple moments, a warm tea, a ray of sun, a smile. Here amid Pinewood's monotony, she found light I'd missed my whole life. The fifth lesson came from Clara. Happiness comes from the simple. She made me see, I don't need to wait to leave Pinewood to live joyfully. If I return to Willow Creek, I won't chase fleeting things. I want to watch the rain, sip tea, cherish every second. Clara, with her simple smile, showed me happiness is always there. I just never stopped to embrace it. Nearly 3 weeks into Pinewood, I started sensing a change in myself, subtle as it was. One evening, as dim lights glowed in the common room, I noticed an old man in the far corner, his face lined with wrinkles, eyes heavy with sadness. He wore a faded plaid shirt, holding a cane he didn't use, like it was just there to fill the emptiness. He looked at me, nodded slightly, then introduced himself. "I'm Henry Ortiz, 80, you're new here, aren't you?" I nodded, gave my name, and we started talking. Henry shared his story in a low voice, laced with bitterness. He had a son, David, but they hadn't spoken in over 10 years. "He fought me over money," he said, gripping his cane tight. "I told him not to quit a steady job for some wild ideas. He yelled in my face, then left." Henry paused, staring off. "Last time I saw him was at the door, walking away. Don't even know where he lives now." I asked, "Do you want to see him again?" He gave a faint smile. "Sure I do, but I was too angry, never called him." Henry's story made me think of Michael, my son in Los Angeles. We'd argued after James's funeral. I blamed him for not staying longer. He said I didn't get his work pressure. Since then, Michael rarely called, and I didn't reach out either, holding on to a grudge. Seeing Henry, I saw myself, a mother clinging to resentment, growing further from her son. I asked, "Do you regret it?" Henry nodded, voice shaky. "Yeah, I do. But it's too late now. I don't know how to fix it." One night, I saw Henry alone, staring at an old photo of David from his wallet. He cried, shoulders shaking, and I felt his pain. Not just for David, but for trapping himself in bitterness. I rolled over, asked, "If you had a chance, would you forgive him?" He looked up, eyes red. "I'd love to, Evelyn, but I don't know where to start." His words struck my heart. I thought of Michael, the words I hadn't said, and realized holding anger only hurt me more. That night, I couldn't sleep. I remembered Michael's smile, the days he ran around the rose garden in Willow Creek as a kid. I'd let resentment cloud my love, and now I sat here, miles from him, no different from Henry with David. The next morning, I asked a nurse for the phone, called Michael. When he answered, I didn't bring up the past, just said, "I'm sorry for not understanding you. Mom misses you." He paused, then said, "I miss you too." I cried, feeling like a weight I'd carried for years lifted. The sixth lesson came from Henry. Forgiveness brings peace. He showed me that holding a grudge doesn't hurt others. It imprisons you. Henry hasn't found David, but he sparked my resolve to mend things with Michael. If I leave Pinewood, I won't let unsaid words become regrets. I forgave, not because Michael deserved it, but because I needed freedom from the pain. Henry still carries his burden, but thanks to him, I found a lightness I thought I'd lost forever. Over a month into Pinewood, I started feeling a bond with the people here. One evening, as the soft yellow light glowed across the common room, I noticed a silver-haired woman, petite, sitting near the dining table. She wore a red sweater, her voice lively, as she chatted with a few folks around her. She turned to me, smiling brightly. "I'm Alice Brooks, 76. You're Evelyn, right? Cured you like roses." I nodded, a bit surprised by her friendliness. Alice said she'd lived in Salem her whole life, worked as a gardener, and loved foggy early mornings. Alice quickly became someone I looked forward to seeing daily. She told me about her younger days, planting carnations in her yard, or biking around Salem with her husband, before he passed. "I liked living simply," she said, her eyes lighting up. A sunny day was enough for me. That evening, she pulled me into a little game, sharing our happiest memories. She laughed hard, recalling a time she fell into a river while fishing, and I laughed too, forgetting my hip pain. Alice had a way of making everything light, as if Pinewood wasn't a place to wait, but a place to keep living. But the next morning, I woke up in my single room to whispers from nurses in the hallway. I rolled into the common room and felt a strange heaviness, silence, thick and somber. A young nurse approached, her voice soft. "Miss Harper, Alice passed away last night." In her sleep, very peacefully, I froze, unable to believe it. Just last night, Alice was there, telling stories, joking, her voice still echoing in my head. I asked, "How could that be?" The nurse sighed. She had heart failure, but no one knew. She didn't want anyone to worry. I asked to see Alice's room for a moment. It was just like mine, small, plain, with a few family photos and a wilted plant on the table. I held her hand one last time, cold but still soft, like when she patted my shoulder the night before. I cried, not just for losing Alice, but for realizing how fragile life is. She left without a sign, leaving me with emptiness and fear. I thought of my days in Willow Creek, putting off calls to Sarah, skipping afternoons with Michael, assuming I had plenty of time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I remembered Alice's smile, how she cherished every day despite her frail health. She lived fully, wasting not a second, while I'd let days slip by quietly, waiting for a perfect moment to truly live. Alice's death was a wake-up call. I don't know how many days I have left, but I know I don't want to waste another. I want to call Sarah, hug Michael, see my rose garden again, even just once. The seventh lesson came from Alice. Every day is a gift. She taught me that life is short and unpredictable, that we never know if tomorrow will come. Alice left peacefully, but she sparked a big change in me. If I leave Pinewood, I won't wait anymore. I'll live today, say I love you, do what I want. I don't want to lie down someday, regretting moments that slipped away. She has lived fully to her last breath. And thanks to her, I realized time doesn't wait. I have to start living for real, right now. After Alice's death, I stopped seeing Pinewood as a prison. 2 months here, from that first day of frustration to now, have made me a different person. I walked in thinking it was just a temporary stop, a place to heal physically, after my fall in Willow Creek. But now, sitting in my single room, hearing rain fall outside Salem's window, I see Pinewood didn't just mend my hip, it mended my soul. The people I met, Arthur, Margaret, Ruth, Clara, Henry, and Alice, taught me lessons I never grasped in my 77 years. At first I hated everything here. The antiseptic smell, the scratchy TV, the helplessness of needing a nurse to wheel me around. I missed my rose garden, my house, my freedom, but now, I don't resent it anymore. I started talking more with those around me, not just sitting silently, watching the rain. One morning, I asked a nurse for paper and a pen, writing letters to old friends in Willow Creek I hadn't contacted in ages. "How are you?" I miss our old coffee chats. I wrote, my hand trembling with emotion. I sent them off, not expecting replies, just wanting them to know I still think of them. I also call Sarah more often. After that forgiveness call with Michael, I realized I can't let distance with my kids grow. One afternoon, I called Sarah saying, can you visit me? I want to see you. She was surprised but promised to drive from Seattle that weekend. Hanging up, I felt lighter, like part of a burden in my heart had dissolved. I don't want to end up like Arthur, waiting for a door that won't open, or Henry, clinging to regrets over unsaid words. I want my kids to know I love them, right now while I still can. I've changed how I see myself too. Before I feared aging, losing health, becoming a burden. But thanks to Margaret, Ruth and Alice, I get that age isn't what's scary. Wasting time is. I started valuing the small things Clara taught me. A hot tea, a sunbeam through the window, a smile from a nurse. I don't grumble about bland soup or a cramped room anymore. I smile more, even if just to myself in the mirror. One night I lay in bed, thinking about leaving Pinewood, my hips better, and the doctor says I can go home in a few weeks. I pictured sitting in my Willow Creek rose garden again, but this time, I won't just tend plants. I'll call Sarah and Michael over, have dinner, laugh together. I want to rewrite my remaining days, not with material things like before, but with meaningful moments. I'm not scared of aging anymore, but I'm scared of not living fully in the days I have left. The change in me didn't come instantly. It grew from long nights of reflection, from stories of Pinewood's people. They showed me life isn't measured in years, but in how we live them. If I leave here, I won't let a day pass meaninglessly. I'll call my kids, write to friends, watch the rain without regrets. Pinewood wasn't where I wanted to be, but it's where I found myself. A new Evelyn, no longer angry or afraid, but full of hope and resolve to truly live. The stories of Pinewood's people bring us emotions and deeply human values. What about you? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, so you won't miss the meaningful stories we'll bring next.